Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Women Making Big Sales. Today I'm talking to Tracy Boyd. 25 years of marketing experience. I've got 20, she's got 25. We're talking about 55 years of experience. We're going to pick each other's brain. Actually, I'm picking her brain. So Tracy Boyd, she is the Senior Marketing Director for GalaxE. And she's basically in charge of the branding, digital marketing, the entire company's marketing efforts going after Fortune 500 companies. But now I'm going to pick her brain about helping entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, sell to business clients. And how do you do that with marketing? Tracy, welcome to Women Making Big Sales.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Melinda. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, I was so excited when I was talking to you. I'm like, I got to pick your brain. I got so many questions for you. So let's get straight to it. The first thing is, when we were talking and I'm like, man, you're a big company. At first I was like, okay, well, GalaxE must be a bigger company. That must mean unlimited budget, unlimited resources, and you guys can do things that entrepreneurs cannot do. Is that true?
No, no. I think the dream of unlimited budget is, who has unlimited budget? No,
Mm-hmm.
we're like anybody else, and maybe even more so. I actually have a pretty small team that we work with,
Mm-hmm.
and we're always counting the beans, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about counting the beans, being very careful with our resources, our
Mhm.
time. Everybody's busy. So, what would you say in terms of suggestions for female entrepreneurs? We're busy as well. When they are thinking, and we're really talking about people maybe at the beginning just thinking, maybe I should go after bigger companies. What would be the first step they should be thinking about when it comes to using marketing to reach your prospective clients?
That's a great question. So I think the first step you need to think of is, especially when you're small, going after those larger targets, is making sure you can clearly articulate your value to them.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that you have your elevator pitch down, you know exactly your value to them specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Doing your research and know that it's really hard no matter what you're selling. It's really challenging in the IT space specifically, but to rise above that clutter,
Mm-hmm.
right? So not only do you have to rise above the noise, but there's always going to be the "who are you again?" question.
Yeah.
Why am I talking to you? So make sure you can clearly articulate your value proposition, and that your elevator pitch backward forwards, all 100%.
Yeah. Well, the first question I'm thinking is that from your experience, if you're a small entrepreneur, we're talking about your elevator pitch and your positioning statement. Can smaller businesses actually work with big companies? I often hear people telling me, well, I'm small, I'm relatively small. There's no way I can
Mhm.
compete with those bigger guys.
Mhm.
What do you think? Do you agree with that or maybe disagree?
Well, I disagree. I think that actually there's more of an opportunity for a smaller company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
right.
is that?
I think there's two things. I think, two things from my perspective. I'm sure there's 100 more. Number one, I think as a small company, when you're able to bring to the table that maybe your bigger competitors can't, is a a white glove service, a very customized service, access directly to an expert. I think that's critical. That's something that your bigger competitors not only can't provide, but it just doesn't work for their financial models.
Hmm.
So you're automatically gonna can rise above that. I think the second thing is the cost of entry, right? A lot of your bigger competitors have a mammoth amount of infrastructure they're trying to support, and things that just get in the way. They get in the way of relationship building. So I think absolutely, as a smaller organization, you can compete.
Awesome. Yes, we're more flexible. And I love to tell my prospective clients, hey, guess what? You get to work with me. And oftentimes we've got a lot more experience
Mhm.
than a recent MBA graduate. And,
Right.
and being a smaller team, our overhead tend to be smaller than those bigger companies. There's no
Yep.
bureaucracy, and we've got flat infrastructure. You don't, you're talking straight to the boss sometimes rather than
Yep.
one layer after another. Awesome. So we can work with bigger companies, but when we
Yep.
talk and when it comes to trying to figure out that positioning statements, what kind of research do you do? Because that can be an overwhelming aspect for a lot of people, and especially for entrepreneurs. Does that mean that we have to hire a marketing research firm to do this
No.
full-on marketing research? What would be your simple kind of bootstrap strategies?
I think that at a very high level, understanding your prospective clients' pain points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we can all do the research, who they are, what they're going through, but you're going to have to make some best guess judgments,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah,
if, for example, understanding if they just went through, I'll throw out an example here. They're just going through a merger and acquisition.
that's a good.
Maybe you're using something like Google Alerts, which is a tool a lot of companies use
Yes.
to like send alerts, and you're just like, okay, somebody just got promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody just went through a merger and an acquisition. So understanding going in there, what do you think they're going to be struggling with? And second to that is customizing your message for titles,
Okay.
right?
Perfect. Yes.
So, right, if you're, the buying process, I don't know what you're selling, but especially if you're in the SaaS market, the buying process for a lot of these, depending on the size of the organization, the bigger the organization, the more complicated the buying process, the more stakeholders.
Hello. Uh oh.
You're,
Hi.
did I lose you? Are you
A
there?
bit. Yeah. Just one sec. That's. I can pause that. Just 1 second. Let me try if I open the door. All right. I guess we have to do editing then.
Sorry, I hope
No,
that wasn't
I
my
don't know what
side.
happened, but that's okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. So let's start with the the market research. Okay. So
Yep.
whether big companies, whether small companies would need to do market research.
Yeah. So, really, the name of the game when you're doing market research, no, you don't need to hire a consultant. You can if you have the money, but like I said, everybody's counting the beans. Um, Really, the most important thing to understand is where that company is going, what they're doing. A good example would be if you're going through a merger and acquisition, or maybe somebody just got promoted. So putting yourself in that person's position, they just got promoted, understanding um, what challenges they're going to have in solving a problem for them. So understanding what their pain point might be at any given time and how your service can feed into that. I think to me that's probably some of the best market research you can do, and it's not time consuming, right? And once
Hmm.
you kind of have a pattern, you'll know.
Yeah.
A lot of a lot of clients, depending on who you're targeting, if we're talking about bigger organizations, that purchasing cycle and who's involved in that, in terms of stakeholders, is going to be more complex.
Hmm.
So, customizing your message for those individual stakeholders is going to be critical.
All right. Yeah. Do you talk to your salespeople? Because for me, that's why I always tell people sales, it's so important. It's incredibly important, especially your entrepreneurs. You got to listen to those pain points. And that's the
Yep.
advantage to being an entrepreneur because you get to be the salesperson. So you are listening to your ideal clients. And then
Hmm.
that kind of translate to your marketing efforts and things like that. So would you say kind of like, do you talk to your salespeople when it comes to the pain points?
Yeah, so we usually gather that. I mean, it's multiple different ways, right? So our sales team, they're building relationships at multiple levels.
Hmm.
So especially our approach, we're building, our CEO and our CTO and our CAO are building relationships at that level. Our salespeople are building relationships at the bottom level. So making sure you're connecting at multiple points and understanding they're not going to be the same pain points. They're not the things that are keeping your prospective clients, chief technology officer or CFO up at night are not the same things that their senior VP.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
understanding what that is and how how to customize whatever proposal or messaging you're working on is critical.
Okay, so that is like the first step. It's really trying to understand your positioning statement. And then how do you reach these people, especially when it's so chaotic? Sales, I know there's a lot of different ways: LinkedIn, social selling, and events or cold calling, sending messages. But in terms of marketing, what I notice, a lot of people, they're not always hanging out on LinkedIn. So how would you reach? Yeah. So I guess you must understand sometimes that could be frustrating. So how do you make sure that your marketing messages and materials reach the people you want to reach?
Yeah, I mean that's the question, right? So this is where the rubber hits the road, if you will. It's not a one size fits all.
Hmm.
There's a couple different techniques I would say I would recommend. You have to measure. So
Hmm.
very simply, I don't want to say it's such a broad statement to say don't waste time on something you can't measure. But if you're not able to measure that success, you're kind of going to be spending money. You could potentially be throwing money away.
Hmm.
So if you're spending a lot, if you're doing an ad spend on LinkedIn, for example, but you're not able to put any kind of metric behind it, you don't have the ability, or you're not familiar with how to utilize UTM codes or Google Analytics or all those scary things that small companies are like, what the? I don't know any of this. But it doesn't take a lot to put a little bit of mechanism behind measuring any channel.
Hmm.
So it's really tough for me to answer what to do because it's going to vary depending on who your target audience is.
Yeah, but then the most important thing would be, according to kind of what I got from you, is gotta be able to measure it. So whatever you're going to do, you have to measure it to make sure you can
Yeah.
measure the results.
Yeah, you have to. So, if it's LinkedIn, if you're going to be focusing on search engine optimization, if you're going to be going to an event,
Hmm.
there's very easy mechanisms to put in place that help you measure the success. And success to you could be I got a meeting,
Perfect. Yes,
right?
that's it.
Right.
Yes.
That's it. The success to you should be, I got a meeting. I mean, we could all be so lucky to say that I grew my revenue or my sales by this amount
Hmm.
of money. But success at the marketing level could be I did 10 events, I got 3 meetings.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
being able to understand what that KPI is and putting some measurement behind it is going to help guide you.
Hmm.
And until you have that mechanism in place, try try a lot of different things though. Don't be afraid to try a variety of different solutions.
Okay. And so do you talk to your salesperson? Like, what is that process? Because a lot of times, entrepreneurs, people do get confused between marketing and sales. And
Right.
when is the marketing and when's the sales? And sometimes it can be confusing. When am I sending out marketing newsletters and when should I send out sales letters, right? So when it comes to you guys, how do you make sure that the sales and marketing talk to each other, and then who listens to whom? um, how does that work?
So the integration of sales and marketing sounds simple. It's really, especially when you toss around terms like account-based marketing, right? It's a big buzzword. Everyone's talking about account-based marketing, right? Account-based marketing only works if you have an integrated sales and marketing department,
Hmm.
right?
Wow.
It depends on those two teams working together. So this is an area where you can lean on technology a little bit.
Hmm.
So if you have solutions such as Salesforce
Hmm.
is one that's very common. It's a big ticket item, so some smaller organizations might not have that.
Hmm.
But whatever your CRM is,
Yeah.
So use that as a platform to share data.
Mm-hmm.
So at the marketing end, so I'm in the business of demand generation and lead generation. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to generate interest and get warm people to the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a nice handshake where I'm doing a lot of sales enablement. I might be helping them with presentations and custom proposals. And at that point, at some point, we convert them, whatever conversion looks like to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but for us, at conversion would be we've actually signed like an NDA or an MSA, and now they're a client, and we've sold some business, whether it's a proof of concept or we've sold some business to them. So you make sure there's a nice warm handshake, and then but although that doesn't mean like marketing's out of the show. You still have to be, you're still just going to be a firm part of the relationship. And that could be in a variety of different ways, but the CRM should be tracking all of that, every single touch point. And that's where I come back to the data, being able to understand that I had this many outreaches to that client, track their little footprints all over your website if you can, and that in social media, and then however many meetings we have. So,
And so basically the marketing people for you, marketing would be the one trying to generate leads and generate interest, and then salesperson will be the one trying to close the sales. Would
yep,
you,
yep,
yeah?
yep,
And when it
100%.
comes to the marketing, getting the leads, and we're talking about getting the leads of CEOs, of VPs, and
Yep.
directors. This is not getting leads of, hey, sign up and get 25% off on your next purchase.
No,
It's
no,
not,
no,
this
yeah.
is not an easy job. How do you do that? And like, what are the basic? Do you focus on creating interesting content, white paper, case studies? What are that kind of content to really make people want to create the interest and then show their interest?
So there's a term out there called evergreen content, which
Yes.
it's everyone wants to make it, right? Because it's something that never goes away. What I would
How
say is
easy
it
would
does.
that be? How easy would that be?
It's not right. So here's the thing. Similar to what I said before, with in terms of like whatever media you use, whether that is LinkedIn or your website or events, content's kind of the same. You can, there's multiple options out there. There's a podcast, right? You could
Yeah.
use a podcast. You could do a white paper, a case study. There's a lot of different ways to get people's attention. The trick is don't waste your time on talking about you. You need to spend time solving your client's problem. So,
Amazing.
right? So what you need to focus on is, how do you rise above the clutter?
Mhm.
Again, your target audience, and to add, just to make it more complex, it's the CEO's problem, it's the CFO's problem, it's the manager's problem. They're all coming at this from different angles. So their problems are going to be different. Your solutions that you put forward have to be different. So, there's a lot of tricks out there, like, top 10 lists are really popular. Like, you don't get caught up in that. Like, that's all wonderful. That is all really wonderful. But don't get caught up in that. Think first about what would be something that would be useful to them that they are going to need.
That's amazing. And what I notice, I love that sentence because a lot of times what they need doesn't necessarily mean, oh, your solution, your solution, your solution. Like, for example, some
Mm-hmm.
CEOs and stuff like that, it could be last minute crunch and they need something, they need to resolve a problem as soon as possible. So sometimes it's not just about our service or about our expertise. Everybody, like you said, every decision makers or everybody has different kinds of
Mm-hmm.
need, and you just have to create the content to satisfy their need.
Yep. Yep.
When we spoke, you loved podcasts.
I do. I do.
Can
I
you
do.
just share with people why you love podcasts as a piece of content?
So I like podcasts. So podcasts are an easy way for. There's a couple different. There's, as you know, right? Because you're doing podcasts. Podcasts are the name of the game with creating content. Is, a lot of people will tell you you need a lot. It's
Yes.
not necessarily wrong, but creating a lot of content that says nothing is useless. What podcasts do are create, first of all, the asset itself, the podcast is one piece of content. From there, you can pull a quote, that's another piece of content. You could run a transcript, that might be another piece of content. You could, from the podcast, you could perhaps create a blog about the
Mhm.
podcast. You could also, depending on the nature of the podcast, maybe you talk to a client. If you're lucky, you got clients love talking about themselves. You don't necessarily have to talk to the client about your industry or your service, depending on if you've signed an NDA or an MSA. Maybe you're just asking them to come on and talk about something that's important to them. Let's talk about your involvement in the Gleaners Food Bank. Let's give them a platform to talk about something that's important to them. You're sharing it on a platform such as LinkedIn. Now, all of a sudden, you're a teeny tiny little company who has no, people are like, you're working with who? So you haven't explicitly said that, but it's a really nice way of people associating you with that large company that you are, in fact, actually providing a service to. So you've accomplished a couple things. You've given your brand a lift, right? And you've also then created, potentially through one activity, 5 or 6 different pieces of content. So it's for a small company, it's a very easy way to generate a lot of information.
Wow, wow. Actually, I just interviewed another gentleman and specifically about podcasts. He said very similar things. I think some of the women listening here, they're going to be extra motivated because now we've got somebody who's got 25 years of experience and sharing with us that, yeah, it's about repurposing, about getting in front of your ideal clients and being creative. And you're just basically sharing how just using one piece of medium or, yeah, to be creative. Yeah.
Not only that, podcasts are they're really easy to optimize. So anything that's video content related, it's a very low cost of entry.
Yes.
So, you and I are both sitting here in front of a little, I mean, I don't know how much this thing costs. It wasn't that much money, right?
No.
So, you know what I mean? I've literally plugged it into my laptop and all of a sudden I'm doing a podcast. So it's very it's a very low cost of entry. It's not a lot of lift for you or one member on your team. It's something that if you have a younger person you're training,
Hmm.
it's something that they might be able to go, I'd love to do a podcast and help you with that.
Yes.
Um, and again, it's the video is easy to optimize. It's going to be give your domain more authority in terms of search engine optimization. So there's lots of advantages to doing video content.
That's amazing. Okay, so that's part of the content. That is basically content for branding, content for potentially lead
Mhm.
generations, for sales, getting in front of ideal clients. And I love this tactic. Do you have any other marketing things or marketing tactics you think might be interesting now? Is it still video or is it something else? People are tired of video. Do you still think LinkedIn is good? Like, as a 25 years experience, like, do you see things changing going forward? Everybody's back to work. Is it going to be in-person events? What's going to happen? Like, I like to pick your brain and see where the next year's gonna go.
I think it's going to be a mix. I think that there was a lot I saw, and a lot of companies I think saw a lot of success with virtual platforms.
Mhm.
So I think what we might see for a while is a mix. I think we're going to see a mix of virtual events, and we're not attending this event, but when I was researching it, they're doing an in-person event and a virtual event at the same time. So they're doing it digital. So I think we might see a little bit of that. The interesting thing to me about for the advantage from a marketing standpoint is if you're doing an event and some of these events can be absolutely huge. You have a little tiny 10 by 10 booth, if that. How do you rise above the clutter? When you're in person, it's challenging.
Mhm.
Digitally, though, we were able to, back to my whole track it, we were able to see who came into our booth virtually, follow up on leads a little bit more effectively. So I really love the idea of doing virtual events. You can do a podcast, for example, and the old term would have been a webinar, but you can certainly invite people to your quote podcast webinar event. I think those are nice ways of still connecting to people. And I think we're going to see that throughout this year and next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's ever going to totally go away.
Perfect. Okay. So, for a lot of us, some of us, we might not be too familiar with tracking, but there are a lot of different simple software that you can do to track your links. So rather than just simply posting one link, you can use different link trackers so that you can post them in different places
Yep.
and use that as data to analyze the results. So simply Google it. There are so many different softwares out there.
Yeah, Bitly, I'm not that I would advocate for Bitly is one of the more
Yes.
popular. It's the easy way.
Hmm.
You can combine Bitly with UTM codes.
Hmm.
Educate yourself on UTM codes. Google has a lot of free training available on just understanding their analytics suite. Of course they do because they want you to use it. They are, setting the tone on that. But you can combine those two. So you can create a really long UTM link which embeds a lot of different information, shorten it to a Bitly code, and then you can publish that. Don't be afraid to. I'll just add on in terms of content. Use a podcast or a webinar or a virtual event to create one piece of content. Then create a lot of pieces of content. Reuse it. It doesn't get old. Throwback Thursday or happy anniversary 1 year anniversary that we did this thing. Don't be afraid to reuse it. It's everybody's doing it. Trust
Yeah.
me.
People love it. So
Yeah.
awesome. Repurposing, because we're all busy, right? So it's about
Yeah.
repurposing your content. So
Hmm.
we talked about different events and content and simple technique. Shortly, and then UTM code, Bitly and UTM code can be really, really simple to use. So that is
Hmm.
what you see in terms of marketing, right? And so my question is, I noticed that you work in a SaaS industry, and it's a pretty male dominated industry. And how would you feel as a woman? Because a lot of women I support, we sell in a very male dominated industry.
Yep.
So we feel
Yep.
like, when I was younger, I kind of feel the same way. This is more women to women talking to each other. I feel like I need to act like a man to be able to get my voice heard or to, I guess, be part of them. Do you feel that way, or do you just kind of, how would you position yourself when you're in a very male dominated industry?
I think that's a tough question. I hear you. A lot of people, I hear that a lot. I got to act like a man. I don't even know what that means. Right? What does that really mean? I like to act like myself. Maybe that's more. Who knows? My big thing is find your mentor. We're never too old to find a mentor and build connections at any organization you're at. And I say that, but when you're talking about like selling into an environment, um, no, I don't think the short answer is no. I don't
No.
think you need
Hmm.
to act like a man. I think I read something recently. It was kind of insightful about how women um, are perceived as being emotional,
Hmm.
right? Where a man might be it might be perceived as being passionate, right?
Hmm.
So if there's one piece of advice that I would say I personally have found success with is focusing on especially during adversity, right? So I'm red. I'm actually really hot today. Well, when I'm angry, my face gets really red,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So it's a real obvious tell that I'm upset, which is embarrassed. It's a doubly embarrassing for me. So what I have found a lot of personal success with is focusing on the passion in my voice
Yeah.
and how that's coming across. Right. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't say necessarily that is like because we've all been part of rooms where people are yelling at each other and you're like, what the heck? Now, two guys in a room yelling at each other is going to be perceived differently. Let's just be honest. It's two women yelling, or a woman yelling at him. It's going to be perceived differently.
Yes.
So personally, what I have found successful is just being aware of that and cognizant of that and how I'm coming across, and kind of trying to maintain that cool factor and keeping things focused on the business.
So the reality is that it doesn't matter what your gender is, you should try to stay calm. So the reason why I want to highlight that is sometimes we feel intimidated in front of male or female. We feel like, oh my God, we're
Of course
going
we do.
after this,
Yeah.
big titles, right? Big titles, sometimes maybe big egos from time to time, not big egos, sometimes from time
Yep.
to time. And we feel intimidated, but there's nothing we cannot change how other people behave, but we can change how we behave. And I love the fact that you say just remain calm. By
Yep.
remaining calm, by staying cool, um, it doesn't really matter how the other person behaves. I find that they're attracted to that energy, and the whole conversation becomes calmer depending on what kind of sales
Yep.
situation. So,
Yep.
yeah, so it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't really matter what gender or what their positions are. We're there
I
to
don't think
serve
it
and
does.
support. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tough, right? It's intimidating and it's going to take practice. Don't
Yes.
expect to be an expert at that overnight.
Yeah.
You're going to have some moments where you're going to be like, well, I left that meeting and that didn't go well. Okay. Better luck next time. You know,
And you're gonna make
you,
mistakes. I've said
yeah,
stupid things, so many stupid things in meetings, and I looked at it. I'm like, I look back. I'm like, oh no,
right.
that was the
I, cra-
stupidest thing I ever said.
I absolutely cracked under pressure, and it's going to happen. But I think, trying to stay calm, staying aware of your tone, how you're being perceived. And you're right. It's just, people are going to be drawn to that more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's a way, to me, I think it's a way of just, you're going to be earning respect from anybody, male or female.
Okay. So now I'm going to turn the table around, and then you are a corporate executive. So if somebody were to reach out to you and try to sell to you, let's say marketing consultant,
Hmm.
marketing freelancer, and they want to sell their service, they want to have that opportunity to work with you. What kind of tactics do you appreciate the most? And then you think, would make you more open to listen to what they have to say. So if somebody reach out to you on LinkedIn, what kind of messages would you be most likely to say, okay, I'll hear what this person has to say?
Probably this might not be what you want to hear. It's always right place, right time.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. So somebody who, and this kind of goes back to what I said, the way that we sell, somebody who obviously knows what a pain point might be for me right now. I get solicited all the time. I get emails, I'm getting LinkedIn. The ones that I tend to, there's two that worked on me recently. One, the company happened to write something that it was top of mind. So, and it was about leveraging first and third party data, and there's some laws going into effect, and so they took their chance. They knew that they had studied this market, and they put together a campaign, and they said this law is going into effect. Who can we target? I'm going to go through my list and send this email.
I love this. This is the trigger event. I've mentioned this
Yep.
to some of the community, ladies inside the community. This is the trigger event. Something happens within the industry that would make
Yep.
the decision makers want to look for
Yep.
solutions. New regulations, new change in technology is the one.
Regulations. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Thanks.
So
Yeah.
that was critical. The other one that worked was funny. It was the approach was, and I don't know if it just caught me the right day or something, and it wasn't really a gimmick. It was something that I they wrote something, and I was like, okay, I'll bite. Like, and it was because they were selling creative. So this is the difference. They were selling creative, and I thought that's a really creative approach, and I appreciate that kind of tactics because I'm in the creative business. So
Mhm.
I was like, oh, okay. And that also, the second part of that is they kind of must know who their target audience is, right? So they must
Yes.
have known, and they must have had some success that they're selling into that kind of creative market. They can have a little bit more creative license, and it worked. And it worked. I don't know if I actually gave them business, but I did listen to their pitch. I did call them up and ask for a meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like they're willing to just kind of not take it too seriously. And it's
Hmm.
funny, we are selling to corporate clients, but at the end, we're also selling to an individual.
You're
And
selling a human being.
you're
Yeah.
selling to a human beings, and they kind of want to know that the message they're receiving comes from a real person rather than well crafted or some kind of template. So sometimes
Yep.
a relaxing, very casual, simple, straightforward, respectful message can be perceived a little bit more positively than a long, well-crafted, probably some kind of
Oh,
copywriter wrote that
so
whole page.
don't waste your time on a long email. I don't care what industry you're in. Don't waste your time on a long message. It's not going to work. I can't think of anybody who's going to read it. Um,
Got a time to read
sometimes
it.
sometimes a really good subject line, right?
Yes.
Sometimes a really good subject line. But I would say one thing that I think is a turnoff to me, and a tactic that I don't think is, I would never recommend, is the subject line that says, regarding our meeting that you missed. No, I mean
No.
that just sets the tone off for a really, to me, it's like kind of sneaky. It's kind of shystery. I'm not
Yeah.
into that.
Be
So
genuine. Be genuine.
yeah,
You're there to offer a piece of information that might be useful for you, for
yeah.
somebody. And you're there to present that solution and see if the person might find it useful.
Listen, I think, and goes to the whole sell, women selling into businesses. Be your most authentic self.
Oh,
That
I
that's
love this.
be your most authentic self. So whatever it is that you're selling, that you're personally selling, if you're a small business, you're likely the brand.
Yes,
So be really aware of that. Be your most authentic self when you're pitching to somebody. It's kind of a little bit like dating. You're either going to love me and we're going to be a fit or not, and that's okay.
that's perfect. And I love the fact that you said, and it's funny you said that. It's like, it's kind of like a perfect moment. The person was there, the perfect place, the perfect moment.
Time,
But
yeah,
sales, and I think marketing is the same thing. Sales takes a lot of the effort in sales or even marketing is finding those people that have got challenges you can solve. Because you've got a
yep,
group of CEOs, but you're really trying to find those that are struggling and having the problems so that you want to be there at the perfect place at the perfect time. And it's kind of like
yep,
trigger events. Everybody's looking different trigger events. And I think before you mentioned the Google alert, but what we're trying to find out is who's most likely need who will
hmm
most likely need my service and who has challenges right now that I can solve.
yeah. I mean, you might be selling into let's just say you're selling into banks, you're selling into financial, Fortune 100 financial organizations. I mean, maybe you're targeting the CEO on some level, but you might really be targeting the VP of
Yes.
infrastructure, who
Mm-hmm.
has six other levels above him. So
Yeah.
focus on solving his problem for him.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for me, I always like to do this recap or 3 in 3. In 3 days, three separate actions, action steps you can take to really supercharge your business. What I wrote down the first day is I recommend you to figure out your positioning statement. Make sure it's very clear based on the conversation I have with you. And the second step is the learn to track and measure your marketing effort. Would you agree with that?
100%, 100%.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's not hard. And I do think it's like learning how to sell. You got to know how to sell if you're an entrepreneur. You got to do it. But also the next step is you got to know how to track your marketing results.
Yep.
Yeah, and that
100%.
yeah. And the third one is learn how to repurpose your content or, something like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, I call it micro content, right? So create that macro, that one piece of that content that you're putting a lot of what you perceive as a lot of effort. And then create that micro content, repurposing content over and over again.
All right. Thank you so much for all this amazing information because I think it's great to hear insiders' perspective on how marketing works and turn out that it can be easy if you break it down, keep it easy. It is doable for entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs. Just keep the
Yep, baby
system
steps.
simple.
Keep it simple, baby steps. Don't be scared to try multiple things. Don't be scared.
Thank you very much, Tracy, for sharing all your experience with us.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, I hope this has been useful. It's amazing listening to Insider Marketing Insider's perspective on how to sell to corporate clients. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Bye.